The radio in the break room at the Lockheed Aircraft factory in Burbank came on at 11:40 on a Tuesday morning in August of 1971. Earl Mason was at the coffee machine. He heard the opening bars and put his cup down. He turned around. Bill Withers was standing in the doorway. He had heard it too. Earl Mason was 38 years old and had been working on the assembly line at the Lockheed Aircraft plant in Burbank, California for 11 years when he first heard "Ain't No Sunshine" on the break room radio in August of 1971. He was a union man, had been a shop steward for 3 of those 11 years, understood the specific rhythms of factory work, the shifts, the breaks, the particular texture of 8 hours on an assembly line, and what it feels like at 11:40 when the break room coffee is almost hot enough. He had known Bill Withers for 2 years, since Bill had been hired onto the assembly operation. He knew him as the quiet man who stayed after hours sometimes, who didn't talk much about himself, who had a specific quality of self-containment that Earl had eventually come to understand as not coldness, but concentration. Bill Withers had been telling people he was a musician for as long as Earl had known him. He had said it the way people say things they mean but have not yet made entirely real, with conviction, with the forward-looking quality of someone who is building towards something, but without the particular ease of someone who has already arrived. William Harrison Withers, Jr. was born on July 4th, 1938, in Slab Fork, West Virginia, the youngest of 6 children, raised in a small coal town in the southwestern part of the state. He grew up poor in the specific way that small West Virginia towns in the 1942nd were poor. The coal company economy, the church, the community structures that held the place together when everything else was precarious. He stuttered as a child. He sang as a way of speaking without stuttering, the melody smoothing out what the spoken word snagged on. He joined the Navy at 17. He served 9 years. He came out in 1965 with a plan to be a musician, moved to Los Angeles, and spent the next 6 years working factory jobs to pay rent while he wrote songs in the evenings and on weekends, and on the breaks that factory work provides when you are disciplined enough to use them. He assembled toilet seats at Weber Aircraft. He worked at Lockheed. He paid his rent. He wrote his songs. He told anyone who asked that he was a musician who happened to be working in a factory, not a factory worker who happened to play music. The distinction mattered to him. He held it with the specific stubbornness of a man who has decided what he is and is not going to be talked out of it by the evidence of what he is currently doing. He recorded his first album in 1971. Booker T. Jones produced it. The record was called "Just As I Am." It contained "Ain't No Sunshine," a song that Withers had written in the specific economy of someone who had learned to say things in the smallest number of words that could contain them. 26 words of lyric total. The phrase, "I know," repeated 26 times. The entire emotional architecture of the song built from a simplicity so absolute that it crossed from simple to profound the way things occasionally do when they have been stripped to exactly what they need to be and nothing more. He did not quit his factory job when the album was recorded. He did not quit when it was released. He told people he was not quitting until he had a check in his hand that he was certain would clear. He had seen enough of the music industry by that point to know that the distance between a signed record deal and actual money was a distance that required bridge financing, and his bridge financing was the Lockheed assembly line. Earl was in the break room at 11:40 when the radio came on, and the opening bars of "Ain't No Sunshine" played through the small speaker mounted above the door. He recognized it immediately, had heard it on the radio earlier that week, had thought about the man on the assembly line who had told him for 2 years that he was a musician. He put his cup down. He turned around. Bill Withers was standing in the doorway of the break room. He had been passing by on his way from one section to another. He had heard it through the open door and had stopped. He was looking at the floor, not the radio. His head was slightly down, and his hands were in his pockets, and he was listening to himself on the break room radio at 11:40 in the morning on a Tuesday in August while the factory went on around him. Earl watched him for a moment. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that the moment didn't already contain. The song ended. Bill looked up. He saw Earl looking at him. He gave a small nod and continued through to wherever he had been going. Earl asked him about it later, at the end of the shift. He said, "What was that like, hearing it like that, on the break room radio?" Bill thought about it for a moment. He said, "I kept thinking about whether I should quit." Earl said, "Did you?" Bill said, "I gave notice the following Monday, but I made sure the check cleared first." Ain't No Sunshine won the Grammy Award for Best R&B Song in 1972. Bill Withers went on to record Lean on Me, Use Me, Lovely Day, Just the Two of Us, a catalog of recordings that occupied the specific territory between soul and folk and something that was entirely his own. A sound that came from West Virginia and the Navy and 6 years of factory shifts and the discipline of someone who had learned to say things in exactly as many words as they required and not one word more. He retired from music in 1985. He was 46 years old. He gave few interviews after that. He said he had said what he had to say, and the saying was complete. He died on March 30th, 2020, at the age of 81. Earl Mason retired from Lockheed in 1992. He worked the line for 32 years total. He told the story of the break room occasionally, told it to his children when they were learning about work and music and the relationship between what you are and what you do for a living. He said, "Bill Withers spent 6 years telling people he was a musician while he worked a factory job. Most people who say a thing like that for 6 years stop saying it. He didn't stop. He just kept working and kept writing and kept believing the check was eventually going to clear. And when it did, he waited 1 more week to make sure. That's not just about music. That's about knowing what a thing is worth and not selling it before you found out." Not the Grammy, not the catalog. A man standing in a factory doorway on a Tuesday morning, listening to himself on the break room radio, looking at the floor, thinking about whether it was time. Subscribe to Untold Soul Legends. Every week, we find the moments behind the music that changed everything. The comment section is open. Tell us which soul legend story you want to hear next. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who needed to hear it today.